Welcome to the Asclepion. I'm Kevin McKeag.
And I'm Luke Strom.
Our podcast dives into the deep questions of life. How do we find love, discover our true selves, and live out our dreams in this wild, weird world? We're going to take you on a journey of philosophical inquiry, spiritual adventure.
Okay. Just imagine you're like sitting around a campfire with the homies and you all start opening up and talking about real shit. That's pretty much what we're going to do here.
Yeah, or it's what I said.
Okay, look, all you need to know is that we have no idea what we're doing.
Welcome
to the Asclepion.
Asclepion.
That's what I said. So today, we wanted to talk to you about a very interesting subject. It's called the Enneagram. This is a sort of experimental personality test. It's used in a lot of business settings and a lot of spirituality groups and circles. And it's well documented. In fact, there was actually a legal battle over the supposed founder of the field or the subject to copyright the Enneagram. And the U.S. courts basically said, you discovered this theory, you didn't come up with it, but we'll throw you a bone and let you write books about it. The history is very strange. They don't really know exactly when it emerged. Some say it emerged in Roman times. Others say that G.I. Gurdjieff was the real creator behind this. But there's a Bolivian philosopher who's widely accepted as the main proponent of the Enneagram theory, and his name is Oscar Ichazo. He died a few years ago, unfortunately, but he spent a long time, most of his career, I believe, focused on this idea of the Enneagram personality type. And basically, my understanding is a little bit limited. Kevin knows a lot more about it than I do, but basically, the Enneagram, first of all, literally means a figure of 9 points, as opposed to the scarier pentagram. This one has 9, so it's much more chill.
Also not satanic, as far as I know.
Yeah, I didn't see any satanic footnotes in the articles that I read. So
yeah. By the time you see them, it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and one other caveat we should mention is that this is not fully scientifically validated. In fact, it's kind of considered pseudoscience, similarly to astrology. But it seems that...
Well, here, I'll interject briefly, because you have something like the Big Five personality traits, which are validated by science and psychology, right? And that's more of your standard mainstream personality typing. And those are all very helpful. And I would put Enneagram as more legitimate than astrology. Sorry, Luke. More validated than astrology and less than Big Five. I know you're a huge astrology fan, so I don't mean to diss it or anything, but as far as ranking of legitimacy, I would put it somewhere between astrology and the Big Five, something more mainstream like the Big Five.
Damn it, astrology. You gotta just figure out a way to prove yourself, man. What are you doing? You've been around for so long and you're still written off as, used by, I don't know,
come down to earth
influencers. And
get your head out of the clouds, out of the sky, and come down to earth, astrology.
We need you right now. We're in trouble. Humanity's in trouble, man. So Oscar Ichazo, this philosopher, his idea was that in childhood, each of us experienced a specific form of trauma or some expectation that we had, some needs that we had were not met. And our psychological ego came up with an instinctual defensive reaction to that trauma. And this defensive reaction grew into our self-image, or later on in life, our fully fleshed personality. So it's not just you have such and such personality type. What Ichaso says is your Enneagram type is a reflection of your instinct. And it can cause you a lot of suffering if you're not aware of it. But what's cool about the Enneagram is it doesn't just try to inform you about these instincts and your personality, but it tries to encourage you to transcend whatever it is related to this suffering so that you can become a more fully realized individual, human being. And I actually find that's really cool about astrology too. If you learn a bit more about it beyond just the daily horoscopes, there is kind of an attitude of, hey, learn about yourself, take what you can from this and use it in whatever way you want to influence your well-being and improve your life if you can. And I think the Enneagram is the same in that respect. So regardless of its lack of scientific validity, I think it can be very fulfilling and insightful into who you are as a person. So
I think it's wrong to assess it on the grounds of a science. You imagine psychologists in the lab, bringing in people from the street and testing their traits, and famously the Milgram experiments. They would test people's complicity to violence and their conformity, and that's something you can just bring a bunch of people in and you test them. That science experiment was really interesting because Milgram, I believe his parents were Holocaust survivors, right? He was in some way tied to it pretty directly, and he wanted to scientifically validate the tendency to go along with evil out of social compulsion. So he brought a bunch of, random people in to the lab and would sit each participant down. And in another room, you had a second ally to the science team, to part of Milgram's team. But the person who was being studied didn't know that, right? And they had a box with a button in front of them. And the scientist, would buzz in and say, okay, hit the button. And the subject would hit the button. And in the other room, this ally of the science team, they would be yelling or moaning in pain or agony or something like that every time the subject hit the button. So it was this study of how many people will bypass their instinct that they're doing harm and go along with what an authority is telling them, versus how many people will say, you know what, fuck this, I'm not doing this, I'm not hitting this button again, this is clearly causing somebody else pain in the other room, I can hear them, And what he found, I think this was in the 50s or the 60s, I don't remember exactly what decade it was, but it was pretty soon after World War II, if I remember correctly, but don't quote me on that. He found very few people who would actually stand up and say, you know what, I'm not doing this.
holy crap,
Fuck your experiment.
that's crazy. That's
Now,
sad.
hopefully, culturally, we've kind of moved away from a more, conformist view, and, the rights of the individual that we uphold in the modern West. Hopefully that's our standard now, more so than it was in the 50s or 60s, especially after the cultural revolutions. But that's an example of science. Okay, that's like a psychology science where you actually test people. Enneagram, on the other hand, is more of like a philosophical system
Yeah.
of, types that has a more philosophical basis, even though a lot of it's grounded in the body, in the brain.
I think that's a good way to think of it. It's more of a philosophy than a precise science. So, Kevin, I know you've learned a lot about the Enneagram over the years. You've used it on for your own personal development. I imagine you've used it with some of your life coaching clients, perhaps. But what drew you to this initially, and what do you think makes it, really stand out from other types of personality tests, or someone who's never heard of this? Why would they want to look into it and take a test for the Enneagram?
I've found it to be surprisingly accurate, and it's explained people to me in a way that I might not get. Um, because what we often do as humans is we overlay other people with our own motivations and moral framework, right? For example, if I'm more of an extrovert, I look at introverted people and I'm like, come on, like, why don't you speak up and be more assertive? If I'm, say, a type 3, who is the achiever, who really values performance, say, in the workplace, and I look at a type 5, who maybe is more introverted or focused on the quiet acquisition of knowledge rather than hitting goals, professionally, I might say, like, what the fuck is wrong with those people who don't think the same way that I do? Why don't they get with the program? The cool thing about the Enneagram is you can go around the 9 types. It's a big circle. The icon is a big circle with 9 types around the periphery of the circle. You can go around the circle and recognize that there are, at least 9 different ways of seeing the world, 9 different lenses, if you will, of seeing reality. And that helps at least get out of your own tendency of projecting your own values onto others.
Nice, I like that. Yeah, there does seem to be a tendency. I mean, I've felt this too I guess you got to call it kind of being judgmental. You see people who clearly display behaviors or attitudes that are very much unlike yours, or just things that piss you off about other people. And you start to come up with these stories in your head like, oh, well, that person clearly blah, 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 blah. But they really are kind of assumptions and judgments most of the time. And it's very interesting to see things like the Enneagram at least attempts to really delve into the intricacies of the human personality. And, that's its own branch of scientific psychology, of course. But what's cool again is thinking of this as more of a philosophy. It kind of gives you this a little bit more of a free range to think about these things. We don't have to wait for new research studies to come out that are totally scientifically validated and peer reviewed and all these things. We have the ability as individuals to reflect on who we are and what other people are like in increasingly deeper ways, and Enneagram is one tool to help you do that.
Ichazo, all right, you talked about Oscar Ichazo, sort of the progenitor of these ideas. His direct student was a Chilean man named Claudio Naranjo. And I read his book, Character Neurosis, back in maybe 2018. And I put it down. And I picked it up again and I read it again. And then I put it down again. And then I picked it up and read it again. And I go, okay, now that you mention it, I am sort of seeing these types in life. I'm looking around. This would be a good example of a psychoactive idea. Okay, learning about something, right? Suddenly your brain is alert to its existence and you're looking for it in your life, right? And so you must ask yourself, if you're, sincere, right? Is my looking for this thing in the world making me see it? Is it a confirmation bias?
Yeah.
That's an appropriate filter, right? When you're discovering something about reality, you want to be kind of scientific about it in that way. Okay, maybe that's why it's a pseudoscience a little bit, because you're, questioning this set of ideas, this framework. But for myself, as I kept learning about it and seeing these types show up, I would be like, oh, wow, my girlfriend's really doing the two thing of being a martyr and overgiving and then becoming frustrated because she's giving out so much. And wow,
Yeah.
look, when she collapses, she wants to be the center of attention and she's being histrionic. And wow, that fits in well with the two. Now, I didn't go out and tell her, hey, I think you're a two. You need to
Yeah.
meditate more, whatever. But it was helpful for me, again, to understand a person's motivation so that I could give them more credit and benefit of the doubt of, wow, you actually, underneath all of this, Claudio Naranjo would call it neurosis, underneath all this negative emotion, this neurosis that's driving essentially a delusion about our specific delusion about reality. Underneath that is a well of pain, of emptiness.
Yeah.
And yeah, once you understand that about people, you can be more compassionate. And that makes it easier for you because then you're not getting hooked into drama or conflicts where you don't have to.
Yeah. And I think it's important to draw this distinction between learning about, for instance, the Enneagram and saying, well, now that I'm equipped with this knowledge, I'm going to just categorize and put people in boxes and still continue to judge them in this maybe even more, kind of pernicious way. Uh, Not to do that. I think a lot of astrology people do that sometimes. Oh, you're a Scorpio? I could never date you. It's like, dude. Anyway, but
I
to
have a funny story about that actually.
oh yeah, what's up?
Um, it was super early in my Boulder career. I'd come here as a fresh 19-year-old, very open to experience and exploring new ideas. And I went to some dance, I don't know what it was, and there was a bunch of old hippies, from the 60s, and they were aging and they were dancing around. And they were all flowy and had their soft clothes on. And there's this one woman who came up to me, and she's maybe 60, and I was like 20, I don't know. And she came up to me and she's like, what's your sign? And I'm like, I'm a Pisces. And she goes, Pisces are such pushovers,
Oh
And I'm
my
6'1", muscular, confrontation. Like I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. So essentially what she was doing was not even pseudoscience.
yeah.
It was just projection.
That's what I'm talking about. People can
Yeah.
use these things almost in a weaponizing way, which is the opposite intention, what they were meant for. So yeah, to be able to use these to use them as tools, to be able to learn about these things and say, okay, I'm picking up this information. I took a test. You took a test recently. We both got different types, right?
Why
I'm
don't you
reading
tell
all
people
this.
about your type,
I will in just one
Monsieur?
second. Sure.
Okay. Sorry, I'm being pushy. That's because I'm
You're
an
good.
8.
You're good. You too caffeinated, bro?
No, dude, I'm good. I didn't drink a
Oh, I'm just
massive
kidding. I'm pretty
massive cup of coffee this morning. That was twice as strong as it normally is. No.
nice. Okay, cool. I got my test results and I'm reading tons and tons of stuff about my type 7. Apparently, I'm a type 7. And it's like, oh, now I need to learn all this about me. Now I need to. But then I'm like, okay, I got to remember this is merely a tool. I can take what I'm reading here and see what makes sense. And it's really have to try to be as objective as you can to see which things really stand out to you. There were a lot of things about type 7 that really stood out to me, and some where I thought, oh, that doesn't fit me. I see how some people who could be like this would feel that. Or maybe I used to feel like that, but nowadays that's not the vibe. For example, type 7 is known variously as the enthusiast, or I think the explorer or something like that. It's somebody who typically wants to really soak up a wide variety of experiences in life, and that I wholeheartedly identify with. I've done so many different things. I've lived in a lot of different places. I've tried a lot of different skills, and I've, failed at a lot of things. I've done decently well at a few things. I've met hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Um,
I'm thinking
I
of this
never get enough.
now while we're on the topic of your enthusiasm. You've lived in 5 cities in 5 years.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's pretty. Let's see, San
That's
Francisco,
SF, Boulder,
Boulder.
LA, Philly, New York.
That is, yep,
From fall of 2020.
yeah. Wow.
So
Okay. Well, there you go. Type 7, guys. But
case
then there's
study.
but another thing I really identify with that is sort of downfall can be that you're constantly pursuing novelty and constantly pursuing new experiences so much that you don't integrate what you've taken from life. You don't fully form a whole person and focus in on a career path or, who you want to be, what you want to be like. You're so preoccupied with chasing a new thing that you never have time to slow down and really build something, build a life. And that, again, totally resonates with me. That's been a huge Achilles heel for me. When something doesn't go right, I just jump to the next thing over and over and over again. So I've really struggled with like lack of discipline and, taking these things in stride as opposed to, yeah, just, oh, whatever, I'll just do something else. I think that's actually gotten really common nowadays, especially with ADHD rates going up. I was diagnosed with ADHD. I think type 7 has a lot of ADHD energy. So it's like this upside of like I want a lot of experience, I want to have a variety of knowledge, but I have to really push myself to try to be integrated and take time to chill and stay grounded. Like that's a really difficult thing, I think, for a lot of type 7s. And that's not going to be the case for other people. Other people have a very easy time being grounded and they're much more hesitant towards new experiences. So, just as an example, we can go more in depth into that later, but should we break down the different parts you want to?
Let's go more in depth to it now. Maybe we'll start with the type 7 and we can break down sort of the characteristics of that. We'll start there. How does that sound?
Okay. So why don't you, Kevin, tell me your what you know about type 7s and maybe give us a couple
Uh,
fun anecdotes from our times.
Pasty, bad hair, short stature, morally corrupt, impossible to spend time with.
Really hitting, man. Wow.
I know. I miss Cleo, motherfucker. So the sevens are fun. When I first discovered the Enneagram, I was resistant to it. I think a lot of people are. I said, don't put me in a box. I know who I am. I don't need a personality typology to tell me who I am. You can keep that. And I was further confused by taking online tests that weren't that sensitive or accurate. I think maybe it was 2011 when I first discovered it. I took 3 separate tests online and got 3 different results. The best advice I heard about it was to go and read the descriptions of the types for yourself and then, take aim at 1 or 2 or 3 that really fit for you. And as your understanding deepens, sort of home in on one type. And that's what I did. And this has been a journey, because when I discovered the Enneagram, I was almost sure that I was a 7. What that meant was that I was constantly flipping through new ideas, discontent with this or that. I wanted the buffet style with everything, life, areas of studies, romance, although I've always been a pretty loyal person, romantically and as far as interpersonal relationships. So that's not what I meant exactly, but this desire, this the 7's core vice is gluttony, of always wanting more experience. I'm never satisfied. I want more energy. They're the enthusiast. I'm excited. Somebody told me recently that 7's eat really fast when they're nervous, because they want that sort of oral stimulation of just stuffing themselves with new experiences. A good analogy for how they live. They just keep moving. I'm late for a very important date. That they're like the Mad Hatter they're like the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. They just keep moving. That being said, the reason this system is so helpful, right, is because the second you identify your core neurosis and begin to associate with a type, because it lands for you, because it fits you, you can begin to apply the antidote. With the 7, their antidote is satisfaction, like you said, groundedness, getting your feet on the ground, stopping the incessant activity, stopping the thirst for 5 different things at once. The 7, in other words, balances to the positive attributes of the 5, which is depth of study, of knowledge, of accumulation of wisdom. And what this does for someone who has been spinning out of control and just thinking that's normal is it gives them a taste of the center of the circle, which is wholeness, which is love, which is satisfaction, which is virtue, which is clarity, which is ease. The idea with the Enneagram is that, like Naranjo said, character and neurosis, my lens, my framework is setting me up to not see the gaping void at the center of my existence, which is selflessness, and to be constantly running from that or constantly defending myself from that. And we essentially create the conditions for our own suffering in this way. So the whole promise of learning the system, earlier you said, yeah, people don't want to be boxed. Yeah, neither do I. But what I found is the Enneagram is the unboxing. It's like, wow, I'm this type. Wow, that means that I can see it as an object in my awareness. That means these are actually neurotic habit patterns that I've been doing forever. Like I just keep shooting myself in the foot over and over again. I keep banging my head against that same wall. The unboxing is recognizing that, relinquishing it, and dropping in the antidote. For the 8, for example, the 8s are kind of the tough guys, okay, or gals. They don't want to be vulnerable. They have a really hard time expressing their emotions. They believe that life has wronged them, or that life is so hard that in order for me to live, I must be dense and tough and invulnerable. And they often come off as really strong and scary and blunt and intense and direct. And they have this narrative that they're in some ways getting back at a world that wronged them. So their core vice, I think Naranjo calls this vengeance. It's like you could think of the Dark Knight archetype, this Batman thing of like, no one will get to me the way that I was gotten to as a child. I refuse to bow, to submit to the powers that be. They're vengeful. They're lashing back at a life that is perceived by them to have hurt them. The balancing move for these guys, for these types, this type specifically, the 8, is that they surrender into the positive attributes of the 2, the Enneatype 2, which is the giver. So all of this energy and strength gets channeled into what? Being of service to people. These are 2 qualities. Giving more. Being compassionate, reverting back to the heart, feeling deeply. The Enneatype 2 is a feeling type, right? The 2, 3, and 4. These are feeling types, whereas the 8, 9, and 1, those are instinct types. So you can see how it's a very elegant system of, once you learn your type, learning it is the exact thing that helps you transcend it. It's not supposed to be a box. It's not supposed to peg you.
Well, that's good. Not everyone wants to be boxed or pegged.
Some people, however, want their box to be pegged.
That is true. That is true. We're living in a wild world. All right, this is the Asclepion health tip of the day. Did you know that kimchi is one of the few foods that we've determined can help you get rid of microplastics in your body? It's true, at least according to the World Institute of Kimchi. I'm not making this up. They funded a study recently where the scientists found that a particular strain of probiotics in kimchi helps us digest and excrete microplastics, which is good because microplastics are bad. This is great news if you love to eat lean cuisines and Twizzlers and all that good stuff. So go right ahead. Just make sure to eat kimchi. I have 2 questions. But first, do you have an example of what you were saying where you recognize that you have this, let's just say, this vengeance quality, and then you read about this shifting into a type 2 role where you're being more of service? Did you, like, when you read that, and did you try to sort of do that? And if so, like, would you mind sharing an example? And like, how did that feel?
It felt good. And I'm really lucky that I started meditating very early on, and I had a really good upbringing and I had good role models. So I think by the time I actually got into the Enneagram, I had already sort of devoted my life to selfless service. I was in ashrams, I was in orphanages, I was volunteering in India. I was on land crew, volunteering at the Shambhala Mountain Center. I was volunteering to staff weekend meditation retreats. And it was this very elegant thing of realizing that I have all this power and intensity and strength and energy, and I don't know what to do with it most of the time. If I just put down my ego and try to help people as much as possible, it gives my system a sense of soothing.
Wow.
I don't know what to do with myself, so I'm just going to help out as much as possible. And luckily, I had already recognized the antidote. And when I learned about the Enneagram, I was like, well, first, I didn't think that I was an 8. I thought I was a 7. And then I had a girlfriend who sort of pointed at me, and she was like, no, you're an 8.
Oh, Boulder.
Yeah. And she was right. So
That's funny, man.
I said, fuck you. Don't tell me who I am.
Just want to be pegged instead, not boxed. That's wild, man. Yeah, it's taken me a long, long, long time to recognize those well, I guess the type 7 traits in myself. And it's interesting because sometimes I've delved into, I guess you call them, yeah, personality trait tests or studies, and some things are really an awakening. You're like, wow, I didn't realize, I never thought about that as being something as part of me, whether that's, a strength or a weakness, something to work on. So with a type 7, and by the way, I just took this official Enneagram Institute test like 3 days ago. So it's very recent, guys. And it was more of a solidification. It's a lot of stuff that I had realized already, but it felt very affirming to see that. It felt like, oh, okay, maybe, you know, my own process of self discovery or awakening, maybe it's kind of working. The fact that I was able to take this test and it really reflected a lot of the major themes that I've noticed in my life, that felt good. And I also noticed that the type 7, like I was saying, getting more grounded, that is still really hard for me because it feels like I'm shutting myself down. It feels like I'm turning life off. I'm doing nothing. Why would I do nothing when now I live in New York City, when I could go to the opera or go try a new type of sushi or go, walk through all of Central Park, whatever. All these, this is, I'm in type 7 heaven right now, man.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
at a playground right now.
yeah.
Yep.
But I'm so lucky because where I live, my apartment is so nice. I mean, not nice like fancy, but like it feels like a sanctuary. It feels like I can come here and shut all that off and really, yeah, force myself to relax. Another interesting thing with the Enneagram is with each type, and we'll break down the types in just a second, but there's a sort of hierarchy of stages. So correct me if I'm wrong, like the lower ones, it's like there's about 9 or so, and the lower ones are some of the qualities that can manifest when you're really not in a healthy place as a, let's say, type whatever 3. These are things when you probably really don't have any awareness of not only your Enneagram type, but like your thought patterns, your behaviors, how you affect other people, how you think about yourself, really, yeah, negative behaviors and thought patterns. But then as you gradually rise and become more and more aware and integrated, you reach these peaks of whatever your type is, whatever the traits are of that type, they become kind of maximized once you reach this higher state of development. And that's what's really interesting to me. It's, we always hear about the idea of enlightenment, for example, in Buddhist traditions. And what's interesting about the Enneagram is, I guess, enlightenment or fully realized self development is, it looks different for different people, right? So for type 7, for me, it would say that I'm able to seek and take in a lot of new experiences, but I'm also able to almost effortlessly integrate them and stay grounded, but also keep expanding as a person, almost in like a flow state. That's a very, very high level of growth, and I'm definitely not there yet. But yeah, looking at that kind of scale of development within the type 7 for me, it has been interesting because I could see lower levels. I'm like, oh, I kind of remember really struggling with those specific things. And I think I'm at like, I don't know, 7 out of 9, maybe. Some days I'm maybe less, some days a little more. You pointed out in a recent essay on our Substack, by the way, wink, wink, check it out. Give
Check
us
out the
money.
Substack, ladies and gentlemen.
Please, please do.
Please
Um,
pay us handsomely.
there are states and there are stages. So a state is a temporary attainment of a certain, what would you call it? Developmental phase. So for example,
Well,
I've
I don't
had,
think development has anything to do with the states, and that's exactly the point, right? So the state would be like a sudden breakthrough. Well, you can have a state of sleepiness, for example, right? You can have a state of anger. But what we're talking about here is recognizing reality more clearly than you ever have before
hmm,
and having a sudden illumination, a flash of insight, a breakthrough to a level of clarity that transcends your ego fixations, your focus on yourself, and suddenly break through. And you've had a peak moment, you've gotten into a flow state, you've had just a really good day. It's like a state, you know? You wake up the next day and you're like, damn, now I'm, I don't know,
yeah,
hungover or I can't if you go chasing those states too much. I think of like festy kids who take too much acid or something like that. They're constantly chasing the state. They want that
mm,
state, they want that
mm,
state, but it's not becoming grounded and made permanent, integrated into their
yeah.
identity. What do you think? Sorry to interrupt you there, but
No, yeah,
you
you're good. You're
deserved it.
good. Yes, I just to distinguish those because I've had moments where I feel like I don't know how else to say it, but I feel like a god. Like I feel like so effortlessly confident and I'm saying funny things, smart things. I'm connecting with people in a genuine way, strangers. I'm I feel like I'm, been successful in my life or whatever. Uh but then yeah, the next day I'm like, "Oh, that was nice while it lasted." But I'm like, "Dude, that how did I get there? Why was it temporary? When I was feeling that good, it didn't feel like I was just putting something on. It felt like, oh, this, I'm getting a glimpse of what I could be like if I were fully, realized or whatever you want to say. And I guess it was a state because, yeah, that's not how I feel every day. And it often bothers me that I don't feel like that most of the time. I most of the time feel pretty good, but it is interesting when you get these glimpses of like a higher stage, I guess. That's the opposite is this you have attained this stage of growth. So again, just an interesting thing to point out with the Enneagram is there are these distinct stages of development within each type. So that's something to pay attention to as well. And I think without further ado, we should get into the specific types if you're
I want to
down,
say
sir.
something. I'm super down, sir. I want to say something quickly about what you just said, which was well spoken. There is a subtle distinction there that the types are different than the stages.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you have this type system, say of 9 types with the Enneagram. These are personality types that like you're that. It's like your lens that you see from in the world. And it informs your character and kind of gives you some basic traits. You're enthusiastic. I'm invulnerable. She's attention seeking. He's withdrawn, schizoid. She's, passive. He's resentful and strives for perfection. Okay, all of these are different types in the Enneagram. The stage model, like I said in the essay, is a hierarchy of unfolding structures from which you see reality that do predict behavior and traits in some way, but it's more of like this elegantly unfolding evolution of having more granular, clearer awareness and identifying with wider and wider versions of reality as you're ready to evolve and see them. And that goes from concrete to subtle to causal or awareness itself. And what I pointed out in the essay was Robert Keegan from Harvard. This is a good example of not a pseudoscience and actual science that we're studying is human adult development. the stages loosely, according to Keegan, go from conventional, like I was talking about earlier with the Stanley Milgram experiments, where he's studying sort of the limits and how entrenched people's need to conform to authority is. That would be a really good example of a conventional stage of awareness. Keegan's next higher is the self-authoring or achievement. And that's where people start to live from their own deeper moral code. And then finally, he talks about the self-transforming mind. Of these people thrive in complexity, and they're capable of operating through a systems lens in more deeply accurate and nuanced ways, and they're cool to ride with life and be changed and transformed by it. That's why it's called self-transforming mind, because these people are plastic, right? And they're constantly leaning into the ever-unfolding trajectory of this beautiful arc of evolution. And in some ways, they've surrendered to the fact that the more open you can be to reality, the more you're going to feel the bliss of being both a separate identity and also being one with the whole. And so there's this emerging balance of that. Like at conventional, you were just kind of like of the collective, not really thinking about how you're being informed, just kind of going along. At self-authoring, you're an individual, but it can lead to a feeling of nihilism or emptiness, like I'm not connected to anything. At self-transforming, you really start like stabilizing into a spiritual wholeness that's very new. So you're absolutely right that you can be you can have a certain type and be evolving through stages. But they're separate metrics, just so that it doesn't get too fused.
For sure. Thank you. Type 1.
Type 1, Naranjo calls it ego resent. These folks have a very keen moral code. They're pro-social in the sense that they think they're operating in service of people, but their standards are so high that they're like impossible to please. They can't even live up to their own expectations. And so it creates this consistent feeling of being resentful and dissatisfied, and they think they're justified in being angry at everyone because they're not on par.
Type 1 is the idealist, the perfectionist, but the reformer, it seems like it's somebody who wants to shake things up, who's not really satisfied with the status quo, maybe. So when I took my test, the reformer was in my top 3. It was tied for the second one for me, actually. If we can talk about like let's just call it strengths and weaknesses, or like higher development and then maybe lower levels of development for each type, what would those be for type 1?
Sure. Okay. Obviously very justice oriented, of wanting things to live up to a higher standard. So at their best, the type 1s are diligent and conscientious, and they will always seek to do the right thing. And they become these really skilled mentors to others. They're teachers, they're mentors. They tell you how it is. I believe my first 2 spiritual mentors were both Ennea type 1s. They had accumulated knowledge, not in an avaricious way, in the way that the 5 might, but in a way that demanded excellence out of their students. Really want you to excel, really want you to be the best version of yourself. At their worst, they become punitive, excessively demanding, even conceited, of thinking their way is the best, that they're morally superior, looking down their nose at people, when really people are looking at them and going, yeah, no, you're not wrong, Walter. You're just an asshole. If you remember that line from Big Lebowski.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it sounds like type 1 is very involved with having a moral code and a strong sense of values. And maybe this type of person, I mean, I feel like I've done this, kind of projecting your own moral code onto people and perhaps even judging others because they don't live up to that. I've also been accused of giving a lot of unsolicited advice. Uh, and I've definitely been a perfectionist. So it's interesting that this one I scored very high in type 1. I don't know. I have this feeling in me of I want to fix everything. When I see something that's broken or dirty, I guess it is like, a little OCD or anal retentive, compulsive, whatever they say. But I view that as something to fix. I want to make it nicer. It's not that I don't feel like I judge a lot. Well, maybe I do. I don't know. Like I was talking with my parents the other day and I'm like, wow, I live in this like shockingly beautiful neighborhood now and I'm fulfilled and excited at a spiritual level because of how beautiful the buildings are here. All the brownstones, the Queen Anne's, the Victorians, all of that. It feels remarkably good to me to be surrounded by those types of things. And I feel legitimately angry sometimes when I'm around ugly buildings. I feel unsettled when I'm in some place where it's just boring, Or on the flip side, these garish, ultra modern, these skyscrapers that are all glass, that sort of angers me too. And I have to reflect that to myself and say, dude, sure, you can have these thoughts, but don't let them impact you on an emotional level. Maybe a little bit sometimes. It's kind of funny, I guess, but it is very interesting that I've felt such a
Yeah.
strong reaction to being surrounded by what I perceive to be beauty. And yeah, I have a vision for how the world should be. And that can get very dangerous. You don't want to put those things on other people. I don't. That's annoying. When people put that shit on me, I don't like it. And when I have done that before, I feel like I'm just trying to be helpful. And I'm also trying to see what people think about my ideas for how things might be better, how I or the people might do better at certain things. But it comes off as preachy. It comes off as, projecting and being overly critical sometimes. But then at the higher levels of development, these people really can have a huge impact on a community or whatever it may be because they have this sense of like, I want to uplift, I want to enact change on the world. And that's really cool. But anyway, I really relate to a lot of this stuff and a lot of it has given me a lot of struggle and stress. But it's not to say that just because these things give you struggle and stress, you should eschew them. It's what is the positive, healthy flip side of those negative tendencies? That's really interesting. So anyway, I'll pause there.
There's one more line popping into my mind about sort of the perfectionist tendencies. It's from a movie that you like a little bit, which is Taxi Driver.
Oh
What's the
yeah.
line about the rain?
May 10th. Thank God for the rain, which has helped wash away the scum, the garbage, the sluts, the pimps, other words I shouldn't say. This place is a filthy mess. I don't remember the rest, but Travis
Rated
Bickle,
R.
ladies and gentlemen.
Wants
Yeah,
to wash away the filth.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's a perfectionist type for sure.
Well, Travis Bickle is probably a type 1. He wanted to change the world, but guess what? He hated himself, and he almost got himself killed. And he was not a stable person. So he had this moral code that he tried to impose on people, but he was kind of nuts. Yeah, very nuts, actually. But that's what makes that movie so interesting is we hear him say some things, and we're like, wow, this guy really wants to make the world a better place, but he's so unaware of how much he kind of loathes himself that it ends up biting him in the ass, right? So if he had just taken the Enneagram test, Taxi Driver wouldn't have been released, and we would be worse off for it. God damn it. Yeah, interesting. Good call out. Good call out there.
Type 2, the giver. I really like these types. I think my grandmother is a type 2, and she is just the sweetest person in the world. At their best, I mean, I'll just use her as an example, man. I hope you're listening to this, Mare, because I just love you so much, and you've been so loving to your family. It's miraculous, and yet it's so everyday and normal. I just, love you. So the Ennea type 2s are giving, right? My grandmother is about to be 95. Sorry, I told everybody your age, Mare, but I hope you forgive me. But she serves people and she prays. All right. So she takes care of people. She's active in her community. She's loving to everybody. She's upbeat, and she goes to church and she prays for her family. It's like at their best, the type 2s are so giving and generous and kind. The flip side of this is martyrdom, resentment. I'm giving so much of myself. Why is nobody reciprocating? I can give so much. Nobody else seems to be giving to me. I'm mad about that. They collapse into being the center of attention, of trying to attract attention towards themselves. The word that Naranjo uses is histrionic, flailing about, making a scene. But at their best, they're just hallmarks of compassion, loving kindness, care. It's really a beautiful thing.
My grandma is like that as well. I've never heard her once ask for some kind of favor or complain. It's really wild, man. And I've never seen her resort to an unhealthy manifestation of the type 2. I'm reading my notes here, and it's really seems to be the opposite, where they're domineering and trying to even maybe manipulate people into giving back to them.
Why does nobody love me? I feel
Yeah.
worthless. I need to prove to everybody that I'm worthy by giving and giving and giving and giving and giving.
This I scored dramatically lower in this type than anyone else. It was so funny. I had all these other types, and at the very bottom was the helper type. I'm like, wow, what kind of person am I, man?
Not a helpful one.
Apparently not. I thought
not
I
a
was.
helpful person.
I hate everybody. Oh, interesting. So type 2, the giver, the helper, seems like a pretty, well, not basic, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So we know a lot of people like this, people pleasing can bite you in the butt too. I wonder if type 2s, if they're feeling sort of like they're in an unhealthy place, if they need to learn to give themselves a lot of love, if they're trying to be so giving to others, that probably is their Achilles heel, I would imagine, is they don't give themselves enough.
The 2s balance to the healthy aspects of the Thor. So the best advice I ever heard given to a 2 was just do you. Just do you, bro. Just be yourself. Fill up your own cup Stop seeking to please and give away your energy to earn love. You're enough. You don't
Mm,
have to be anything for anybody. You're enough.
that's nice. If you can give advice like that for each type, that'd be great.
Sure. Ones, relax and have fun. Twos, just do you. Fill up your own cup. Just do you.
Are you looking for a mortgage? Wait, seriously? How did you get that much money? What do you do? Who did you kill? Is your dad Tony Soprano? Do you live in Missouri? I can't even afford nice shirts. Anyway, if you're looking for a mortgage, go nowhere else but Rocket Mortgage. We're not even sponsored by Rocket Mortgage. I just like saying Rocket Mortgage. There's something wrong with a guy liking certain words? What is this, Stalin's Russia? Jesus. Anyway, Rocket Mortgage. Also, can I have some of your money? Okay, let's shift to type 3,
The
the
achiever.
achiever.
Yeah. The achievers, they look good. They're obsessed with making an impact, with performance. They're usually very successful. They know what other people want before other people say what they want. They have this uncanny ability to be able to project an image towards others. One of my clients, who I think is a 3, described it as chameleonism, of being able to shift pattern in order to show up in a certain way, but specifically in a way that looks really good, that reflects really well on them.
Mm.
And this creates a pattern of trying to be an actor. They get stuck in their own act, and this can turn into actual deception. I've known 3s who are just compulsive liars. That's where it gets really dark. They're compulsive, pathological liars. They're so used to acting, they fully believe that the act that they are putting out in order to look good and subtly shift positive attention their way is reality. They subtly believe their act is their authentic self. And that's where they get really stuck.
Yeah, I scored, the type 3 was tied for second for me when I took my test. And achieving is very interesting too, because again, then this healthy side, okay, you want to do something that really matters, not just to you, but hopefully to other people. You want to have a positive impact on the world or your community. On the flip side, you want to be the shit. You want to be looked at as the coolest person ever just because you think you're the coolest person ever.
You are.
For pride, narcissism, right? Those people are super annoying. But yeah, I think I've dealt with, well, I know I've dealt with a lot of jealousy. I see people who are achieving things that I want, and I immediately don't like them. I'm like, oh, they're not that good. They're overrated. They're a nepo baby, whatever, all this stupid shit. Instead of saying, oh, good for them. They probably worked really hard. Um, I'm I hope I can do something like that myself, whatever. Yeah, this achievement idea is interesting. Like, where does this come from? This is one where I think if you do some searching, you may find that you feel some kind of insecurity, inferiority complex. I know that's something, again, I have struggled with as well, where I try to overcompensate by being tough, being cool, or whatever. And deep down, I still don't feel that great about who I am or where I'm at in life. And this is one where basic humility, feels good to kind of balance it out, where I can say, yeah, I do like myself, and for all of my flaws and failures, I'm okay with that. And not only that, but I can be humble and still really ambitious. I don't have to tell people about my achievements to feel good and get, seek external recognition. Recognition can be nice, but to be fulfilled in these ways, like on your own, that can be really hard. I imagine if you're very much a type 3, I bet that's really hard. So yeah, those we've already covered my top 3, so I'm excited to get to yours. You're type 8, but anything else on type 3s here? What's your
Yeah, so
advice for type 3s?
you nailed it. So these people are so obsessed with being valuable and with achievement that they'll actually prop up a kind of fiction in order to be liked, to appear good, to appear valuable. And that can border into, when it's unhealthy, that can border into deception, inauthenticity, a kind of mask. So the advice for the threes is reverting back to truth, authenticity, kind of rawness, you know, imperfect, not trying to put on an act so much as just being very real. So be real, threes. Be real. Well, we all love you as you are. You don't have to put up
Mm,
an act in order to be appreciated and valued by others.
that's nice.
Are you taking that in, Lucas?
Yeah, I'm gonna pretend like you were saying that to me. So, type 4, the individualist.
They're the worst. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Lot of fours in my life. I love fours. They really are unique people, right? They don't really care that much what the crowd is doing. In fact, they're often organized against the mainstream. They just they'll seek out unique ideas and unique clothing sometimes and ways of being in the world that are, I mean, they're fucking unicorns. Okay, we'll say it. But they often have this Achilles heel of, because I'm so unique and different, which they're often very proud about, nobody gets me. Nobody loves me. Nobody gets me. Nobody really understands my plight. You don't get me. And this makes them feel valueless, worthless, less than, socially isolated. And they often become very high in negative emotion. Naranjo's word for this type was melancholy. So, as well as being sort of shining examples of, bucking the trend, they can also feel incredibly sad, and usually do. And frankly, the fours will often sort of wallow in their sadness.
Does that, like, in your experience or your knowledge, do you think that's due to kind of a fear of taking action? Because sometimes when I kind of get down on myself, I definitely get moody, too sensitive sometimes, and it's because I'm not doing anything or not doing much with this quote unquote, uniqueness. I'm not writing, or I'm not even like telling people about new ideas that I have or whatever. And so I wonder if that's a common theme with type 4s, that, yeah, they get kind of stuck in these wallowing moods. And
Yeah, it's like
maybe, yeah.
Eeyore. It's like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
Hmm.
You know, My own insight into this is that it's kind of a vacuum in their own hearts. This feeling of vacuity or not being enough. It manifests as envy of looking out and thinking everybody has it except me. I'm so different, nobody gets me. And the way that you balance that is by moving towards balance of emotion, positive emotion states, sort of transcending out of that neurosis and self absorption. And, recognizing equanimity in your own self, recognizing that you do have something valuable because of your uniqueness, but that doesn't separate you from other people. And you're only as unique as every other fucking four in the world. you know, there's
Gotcha.
much more connecting you to others than you think.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, being unique is cool because then you can, kind of hopefully do things, show people things that maybe they haven't heard or seen before, and that's nice. But then yeah, when you're
That's
sort
a
of
word.
when you're in this pattern of thinking, "Oh, I'm so different," and that means I can't relate to other people. Obviously, that's not a good place to be in. So,
It becomes pathological pretty quickly.
Type 5, the investigator.
These types are sort of obsessed with accumulating knowledge. Um, in their minds, it's to see clearly. They're highly intellectual. They have this pinpoint accuracy of being able to break down concepts and parse them apart in a way that's truly impressive. Their klesha, to borrow a word from Buddhism, the thing that gets them in trouble is that they're not seeing that a lot of their pursuit, their mental pursuit, is driven from a sort of core aversion to life and connection with others. So you can imagine them kind of turning away from life and from relationship and focusing in on trying to understand it and accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. And they fall into a trap of therefore being disconnected from their inherent vitality. And so feeling like they're going to be catastrophically depleted by other people, by engaging fully with life. So Naranja's word for this is avarice. These are the avaricious. They want to take more and more and more and more, usually information, and they feel like they don't have anything to give back. Another word he gives it is stinginess. So taking more and more and more information in this way that's turned away from life and is low key avoiding life and relationship. And then they feel like they have nothing to give. Or it's more than that. They don't feel like they have anything to give. It's that they fear giving themselves away, if that makes sense. There's a subtle distinction there. I don't have enough to give to you, which makes it really frustrating sometimes to be in a relationship with them. These are the schizoid types, the head types. They kind of go into their brains, and their vitality is felt lacking.
Yeah, this one is a little more mysterious to me because it seems like, they're very logical, kind of type A. It would seem like when they're not in a healthier place, like they lack depth and they lack like emotional compassion for themselves. They get so caught up in the intellectual world that they just can't break out of that one framework. But yeah, this one, I don't know, I'm having trouble understanding the scale of like moving from, yeah, like less developed to more developed in the type 5. Like, is there higher development that they're going to be really independent thinkers? Or what is what does that look like?
The fives balance into leadership, into becoming strong and vital, and actually setting a direction and getting out of concepts and into purpose. And
Hmm.
because they have such a broad understanding of life through their intellectual discourse, if they decide to drop out of, frankly, la la land and into reality and then set a direction with that, they have this huge advantage in being able to lead and inform people.
So they can get stuck in their own heads, but more in an intellectual sense and less of a type 4, I'm this unique, nobody gets me thing, basically.
You nailed it. Yeah, they get stuck in their own heads.
Hmm. I think I read that this is one of the rarer ones. But
The
yeah, the type A, hardcore type A, it sounds like maybe are these people, can they be in the negative sense more kind of controlling? They want everything to be, I imagine there's perfectionist traits here too.
Yes, but the hallmark of the fives is more that they leave the party and go home and lock the door and shut the blinds
Hmm,
and want to be in a book because they're more comfortable kind of being in their own intellectual process, which
gotcha.
they don't often realize is fueled by this subtle aversion to feeling connected.
Gotcha. Okay. Glad I'm not one of those.
We love you fives. We love you fives. Actually, there's some fives in my friend group and in my family, and they have the run on a lot of things. They know a lot of stuff. They like accumulate knowledge and even hoard knowledge in a way where you could have like one of the most interesting conversations of your life with one of these guys
Hmm,
or gals.
yeah, okay. Well, that's something. Type 6, the loyalist.
So these types are typified by fear. Naranjo uses the word cowardice for this type. It's like a fear that goes, sorry, it's like an anger that goes inward and causes them to uh, project their fear outwards onto the world, onto other people. And so rather than recognizing their own, you could say, rather than recognizing their own kind of scariness of like, I feel angry and I want to like put that out in the world, which they often do get pissed off. Um, Instead of recognizing that that seed is within them, they project that outward at the world and see the world as a dangerous and threatening place. And so they become fearful. How this benefits, how this becomes of benefit, is that these folks are deeply loyal to the people around them, to their friend group. They will often have your back through anything, no matter what. And it's sort of correlated, as you might imagine, with a sense of humility. They're not going out and being like, the world is mine, I will take it over. They're going out and they're careful and they're measured and they're more oriented towards safety. What makes me feel safe? And they often won't challenge you in relationship, but they will, however, be deeply loyal to you. And I believe that's why it's called the loyalist type. Their balancing act is courage. Sorry, the way that they become balanced is courage. So they go from fearful and keeping their heads low to actually finding that sense of brightness, reclaiming their own anger, reclaiming their own power, recognizing their disempowerment, and actually stepping into courageousness, bravery.
My brother has got to be a type 6. I don't think he's taken a test, but as long as I can remember, man, he has to be in a pack. He doesn't have like for him to be like, hey, I'm gonna take a solo trip. No, like that will be like incomprehensible to him. And it's always baffled me a little bit because I see how fulfilled he is with all of his friends, but then I've always been so much more the opposite. I mean, I've always had at least a few friends, but I've been so comfortable being alone my whole life. And so I see him, being with his friends all the time. And I'm kind of thinking like, dude, don't you want to just like be alone? But clearly he kind of doesn't. And maybe that's potentially a weakness, but he has such an easy time hanging out with people, making friends, being, I would say he seems to be kind of a leader in his friend group. He's not just a fully, like a passive cog or something like that. Like he has his own style and personality and he brings something to the table within the group though. Like that's how he functions. And that's cool. But again, that's just so interesting to see like, well, he's just always been that way and I've always been kind of different. I get value from being more in my own world or whatever. And I've kind of had to learn how to be more of a friend guy over the years. And so I wonder if some of these type 6s struggle with finding independence and kind of like wondering who they are within a group. But yeah, the loyal. Yeah, my brother's one of the most loyal people I know. Like no doubt about it.
What up, Sam? Luke just said you were a scaredy cat. What are you going to do about that?
He'll crush a beer can on my face.
Yeah, we're airing some live family squabble on the podcast today.
Yeah, type 6s are cool. We like you guys. We need more type 6s and type 2s. I've always said we need more Samwise Gamgees in the world, man, and I stick by that.
I like that. We've done 7. You heard about 7 and 8 earlier. Luke's is 7. I'm an 8. We touched on that. So maybe we'll just jump to 9. And if you want to look into this more, ladies and gentlemen, you can always do your own research. Lots out there on the Enneagram, not the pentagram, the Enneagram. 9 sides. Not 5
the
points.
gram either. Instagram. Not that either.
Not the gram.
Type 9, the peacemaker.
So these types are more like the Buddhas of the pack. They're often they appear to be very relaxed. They're often very easy, very sanguine to get along with. They're very social, generally pro-social. So they get into trouble because instead of more direct contact with people, they prefer confluence, which is to say they prefer being in a kind of flow with people. But what ends up happening is they forget themselves and they forget that they have desires. and then they'll go along to get along. And Naranjo called this laziness or indolence, not in the sense that they won't go work out or they won't work 40 hours a week, but psychological laziness. Um, he also called it defensive extroversion, right? So I don't want to look in here, okay? I'm externally oriented so that I don't have to deal with conflict in myself. These are conflict avoidant types. In that sense, again, they're easy to get along with, but you often get the feeling that like nobody's home. The way that these guys balance is by actually starting to introspect, figure out what they do and don't want, express that, and then start to take a direction towards something that they desire and act. They get really resigned. They just settle in there. They really resign themselves in relationship, in work. My grandfather, I think, was a 9, and sweetest guy, such a huge heart. But the way that I remember him is he had this, he had this, he had a teal lazy boy chair that was a corduroy lazy boy chair. And I
Wow.
imagine him just, he would always be in that chair with his feet kicked up, with his comfy slippers on, you know, just reading his newspaper. He was really settled in there, man. He was really comfortable. So the 9s, but also like such a sweetheart and just so good to his family and such a huge heart. But the 9s just get really too comfortable. They become lazy. They become psychologically lazy. And the way that they get out of that habit is becoming action oriented, figuring out what they do and don't want, and actually learning to be disagreeable, learning to rock the boat a little bit.
Gotcha. I think my grandpa might be a 9 as well. Yeah, the peacemaker, that's interesting because some people on a slightly lower scale are like, they want to be friendly at all times, they don't want conflict. But then at a really high level, they could be even like some kind of a mediator or a public interest lawyer. Um, someone like Gandhi, I guess. Like they really want to spread the word of, no more war, whatever it may be. I've had some trouble wrapping my head around these tendencies sometimes. Like I hear it frustrated me to hear about John Lennon's bed peace movement thing. Because there you go again, like you're saying, it's kind of lazy. It's like, well, sure, you can lay in bed in your mansion in New York City. That's nice. Okay. But obviously, it comes from a good place. And so, I mean, maybe it's because, yeah, I'm a type 7. I want that action. I want to do stuff, more experience. And yet, these people are often very soothing, very calming to be around, which is nice. And I have to do that to myself. I have to kind of give myself grace or peace a lot of the time. So again, it's so interesting how these different types interact. Um, and one other thing I read from Oscar Ichazo is he was saying that, yeah, you really, even though you may be a certain type, one of the 9, the point is not to just say, well, I'm a type 4, that's me. Like, I'm not going to really think about the other ones for myself. His idea was to try to recognize these elements of each type in you and, see what you can put together and learn from each type. I think all of us have a little bit of each type, I think is his point to varying degrees. But
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And more importantly, if that is so, if we have a predominant type that we identify with, but also have aspects of these other types, within us, that means we can do our own balancing act of those qualities, say of indolence or laziness. Okay. I can see that in myself. I'm not a 9, but I can see those qualities in myself. And so what do? I get clear on what I want, and then I pick a direction, and then I assert myself, even if it causes a little bit of upset. And, or with the 4, for example, I can see a place where I feel slightly put out because I think I'm unique, and that might stir up some feelings of loneliness or isolation. You begin to familiarize yourself with these psychological qualities in your own psyche, and that makes you much more understanding and even tolerant of the types when they show up in your world, because you can understand people's motivations in a new, fresh way, which creates more actual social harmony, more actual social cohesion. And that's the promise, really the promise of doing this work of understanding the types in yourself and others, is to transcend them. I said earlier, it's not a box that you put yourself in, it's an unboxing. You take yourself out of the box. You transcend the character and neurosis. You transcend the negative emotion, the self-fulfilling prophecy, the endless loop of your ego that you're essentially stuck in and but don't see it. You transcend that towards what? Towards more wholeness, towards more clarity, towards more elegance in life. Again, rather than shooting yourself in your own foot, rather than banging your head against the same wall. That's the promise of actually taking this typology, this type system, taking it up and using it in your everyday life.
Right on. Yeah, I think it can be a little overwhelming when you first dive into the Enneagram. There's a lot of information out there about it, but I think, at least in my experience, the two main things that I've grabbed onto have been, what are these things saying about my struggles, and how do I relate to those things? What are the things I recognize that I do that bother me, and what does it suggest that I might try to uh, relieve some of those things or grow out of some of those behaviors or thoughts that I have? That's often the most awakening thing, is like, oh my God, I can't believe I never realized I've been going through this thing. And here's this other person or this personality test suggesting that this may be, real for me. On the other side, of course, is like telling you that you may have these inherent gifts, this ability to grow into this highly developed version of yourself, which is obviously inspiring. You're thinking, man, it'd be awesome to be like that all the time. So I think maybe as a starting point, like Kevin suggested earlier, you can read through the different types, see if any one or two, maybe even 3, stand out to you as far as what their sort of negative behaviors are and what really inspires you with the more highly developed version of that type is. And then from there, obviously, go as deep as you want. And at the same time, like we said too, we've each taken a test. We took the official Enneagram Institute's test. There are several out there. I think that one costs $20. It's a one-time thing. It's very easy to take. It took me like 45 minutes. Very easy questions. And at the end, you'll get a breakdown of all the 9 types, and it'll give you a score for each one. It's pretty easy to do the test and get the results. And then the interpretation obviously takes a bit more effort, but then it's really up to you. How do you want to reflect on this, integrate it? Journaling, meditating, trying new things out in your life. Maybe you want to try being a little more assertive, see how that goes. We had another essay on Substack about how to know which way to grow. And I think one thing that we could extend on with that idea is just trying specific things out. Like if you recognize that maybe you are kind of passive and there's a lot of things you want to do that you kind of shy away from and that bothers you, well, just try something that's approachable, but that's a little bit outside your comfort zone. If it goes well, I'm sure that's going to feel pretty cool, right? It might be like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. I want to try more of that. That's a good indicator that, what you just did is meaningful for you. And that might even be a path for growth. So I think we can pretty much close it out here. We've gone through a lot of things, but thank you, Kevin, for sharing your wealth of knowledge on this stuff. It's wild
Thank
how much
you.
you know.
Thank you, Lucas, for sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience as well.
Yeah.
Just in a slightly less cool way than me.
Yeah. It's the glasses. Yeah.
What do I want to say? Okay, um I want to wrap up, but I want to say one more thing, which is the test of whether engaging with a system like this is worth your time is if it makes you have a renewed understanding, a sense of clarity, peace, a feeling of greater wholeness than when you started, right? So you can pick up, you could, I don't know, go to Wikipedia and just start perusing and you might learn some stuff. But is that actually helping you be a better person? Are your friends and family reporting that you're easier to be around or that you're not as easy to be around in a good way? In other words, are you growing? Is this system helping you, allowing you to grow, facilitating your growth? So I would just end on that of if this works for you, great. That's awesome. It's really worked for me. Obviously, Luke's pretty enthusiastic, which I would expect nothing less from him. Pick it up, try it on. If it fits, use it. If it makes you feel more whole, happier, it's a win. And if not, try something else. But we're always here to inform you. Try astrology. We're always here to inform you about things that help you grow and make you happier and ultimately make your life better. So hope this helps. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Asclepion. We hope you enjoyed the show and that you feel uplifted, empowered.
Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram, and find us on Substack.
Farewell, friends.